you want to have a set of wood plugs or some way to plug any other kind of small hole in the boat. I've added a secondary, much more higher capacity bilge pump down in here, sort of a standard medical kit and some supplemental extra items inside here.
Hi, this is Tom from Life 4.0. If you're here, you undoubtedly like boating and being on the water. So do Karen and I. It's been a lifelong passion. But in order to make the passion last a lifetime, we take personal safety very seriously on board our boat, SeaRose. Suffering from an avoidable injury, or worse, hoping for rescue in a storm-tossed life raft, is a quick way to lose that passion. In this fourth installment in our series on boating safety, we focus on safety below decks, including fire protection, keeping water out of the boat, and medical concerns. So, let's go aboard SeaRose.
Okay, the first thing down in the cabin I wanted to talk to you about was fire extinguishers. The boat, when we acquired it, did not have any fire extinguishers on board, so we have 4 fire extinguishers, one in the galley here, one in our forward cabin, and one each in the aft cabins. In our galley here, I've put it down below the stove. There wasn't really any good place to put it outside visible, so I put this sticker on this cabinet and located the fire extinguisher right down inside there. These stickers are easy to find on the internet. Obviously it helps a lot for new people on board to know where the fire extinguisher is. Second one is up here in the forward cabin, right there visible behind the door. And then, as I mentioned, we've got 2 fire extinguishers, one in each of the aft cabins. There's one there and one right here, accessible and visible in our guest cabin. On the topic of fires, we also have a fire blanket. This is just a kind of 1 meter by 1 meter size, and you just simply throw it over the fire. Like if you have a fire on your galley stove, you can throw it over that and extinguish it by blocking the source of oxygen to the fire. Now we've also got down below the nav station, I installed a carbon monoxide alarm right there. It's wired into the boat, and so it's going to detect any poisonous gases and throw off an alarm for that. Back on the topic of ergonomics, it's important to have some good handholds. We've got 2 here on the companionway for safely getting up the companionway and back down. There's also a big bar here. On our old boat, we had some handholds down on the ceiling, and that was really nice. Don't have that on this boat, but there are these sort of fiddles that you can grab onto here, and you can brace yourself against this post for the mast to give yourself some more support. But you want to think about that in terms of what are the things you have that you can grab onto when you're bouncing in the seas and trying to safely, particularly get up and down the companionway. We have an offshore flare kit that I've mounted down here in one of the aft cabins. So it's got the sort of standard setup for offshore flares and smokes and a couple parachute flares in there as well. And then in our aft cabin here, we've got a first aid kit right down here. Sort of a standard medical kit and some supplemental extra items inside here. So it's got the standard band-aids and syringes and ointments and that kind of thing. We've also worked with a couple of doctor friends of ours to get prescriptions written up for EpiPens, seasickness medication, stream of antibiotics, and a couple other things related to that. So see what you can do for that. If there's a travel clinic nearby you, they can be a great assistance for what you might need for malaria and that kind of thing. Again, you want to assume that you're really beyond normal medical care and think of it that way and say, what would I need as far as first aid and to recover somebody, especially around seasickness, dehydration, splints, and those kind of things. So there's a lot of things you can do there, and space may be an issue, but you want to try to acquire whatever you can for your voyage. Okay, now let's talk about bilge pumps. The boat came with a bilge pump down in here. Right down at the bottom of the bilge is a little well down in there. It's a Rule-Mate, I think it's 1,100 gallons per hour, automatic bilge pump there. Pretty standard kind of bilge pump. And I've added a secondary, much more higher capacity bilge pump down in here, made by Johnson. It's a 4,000 gallon per hour pump. Our insurance company was requiring something that was larger than the Roommate here, and I ended up finding the largest that runs off of 12 volts. So again, this is 4,000 gallons per hour, so it should do a very good job in an emergency. You can see the discharge hose here. That's an 1.5 inch diameter hose, and it can take either 1.5 inch or 2 inch diameter. I really didn't want to put a 2 inch diameter through hull in the boat for discharge, so I went with 1.5 inch. That hose runs out and goes up behind our aft head and discharges over the side of the hull there. Now that new Johnson bilge pump, I'm using this smart control alarm. So part of it is pretty standard. It's off, manual, and auto, but it has an alarm that goes off when the bilge pump runs for, I think, slightly longer than like a minute or something like that. There's a slight delay. It'll let it run for a short period of time, and then it'll sound a very large alarm right here, letting you know that the bilge pump is running. For instance, if you're running your engine, you may not hear the bilge pump turning on. So this was a good setup. It's got a float switch that's separate from the pump, so the pump is just a kind of a standard pump, just pumps the water. So you have to buy a separate float switch and a separate control for on-off manual and alarm. And the final bilge pump we have is a manual bilge pump. Most cruising associations or rallies require you to have both an automatic pump and a manual pump. And so our manual pump pumps down from that same lower bilge area where the Rulematic electric pump is, but the physical pump is up in the cockpit. You open up the seat below the port helm, and there's a pump handle there. These pump handles, it's very important to make sure there's a lanyard on them so that you can use the handle to insert into the pump. In this case, it's a Whale branded pump, but in case the handle slips out of your hand, it won't go overboard since it's got a lanyard on it. So that pump is obviously to supplement and also to use if there's an issue with electrical power on the boat. Okay, next up is seacocks, and so the point here is to make sure you know where all your seacocks are and be familiar with how to operate to close those seacocks. Make sure you're lubricating the ball valve in there so they can easily open and close. You also want to have a set of wood plugs or some way to seal off the seacock in case the handle breaks off or something, a lightning strike and the seacock is blown out of the hull. Some way to plug that seacock and also plug any other kind of small hole in the boat. So you want to have a supply of those wood plugs. Ideally you want to have them located right next to the seacock itself. We have a bag of plugs that we use that's at the nav station, so we can pull those out and use them. On our winter project list is to make a diagram of where all the seacocks are in the boat. We've heard other people do this, and I think it's a great idea. So that's another thing that you might want to consider, is to make a diagram and make it, like I say, put it on a laminated piece of paper so that other people can reference it and find it easily. But make sure you know where all your seacocks are. And just another note on that topic is if there's any way that you can consolidate seacocks and close one off permanently or fiberglass over it and seal it up, particularly modern boats, new boats, they put seacocks all over the boat, and each one is a risk for sinking the boat. So we actually have another project too that we're looking at to try to see if we can consolidate where seacocks are pulling in seawater for use for various things. That we can have one seacock and then have a manifold inside the boat that controls the valves to each one of those devices that needs that water.
Okay, that wraps up this fourth video in our series on boating safety. As always, we hope you enjoyed it, and we encourage you to like it so others can more easily find this kind of content. Be sure to check out our playlist of other how-to videos on our Life 4.0 channel, as well as our many sailing adventure videos, as we explore this amazing planet one anchorage at a time.